The Krillarian Empire stretched across thousands of star systems, a testament to power that had endured for millennia. Under the rule of Emperor Zarthus III, an ancient energy being housed within a magnificent, towering mechanical suit, the Empire had achieved a facade of eternal stability. The Emperor, believed immortal and omnipotent, ruled with unquestioned authority from Xylos, an artificial planetary metropolis serving as the galactic capital and home to the Grand Senate Hall. Ambassador Lyra of the Xantid species, a race of empathic insectoids who maintained careful neutrality in galactic politics, had served in Xylos for decades. Her kind possessed the unique ability to sense collective emotional currents and intentions. Through this gift, she had long perceived the stagnation and hidden fear beneath the Empire's orderly appearance. From her private chambers overlooking the gleaming artificial horizons of Xylos, Lyra recorded her observations as she had done every cycle for 37 standard years. The Grand Synod convenes tomorrow for what the Imperial announcement calls a procedural declaration. Yet beneath the polished corridors and ceremonial exchanges, I sense unusually potent undercurrents. The Krillarian elite project confidence and superiority as always, but their emotional signatures betray growing concern. She paused, her antennae quivering slightly as she processed the empathic signatures pulsing through the city planet. The conquered worlds suffer while resources flow inward. The outer rim planets wither. Small rebellions are crushed with increasing brutality, yet the frequency of resistance grows. And then there are the Terrans. The Terran Alliance, comprised of humans who had joined the Empire relatively recently, was considered primitive by Krillarian standards. Yet they expanded and developed technology at an alarming pace. Emperor Zarthus III and the Krillarian elite displayed contempt for them publicly, but Lyra sensed their wariness. The Terrans adapt and innovate in ways the Empire finds unpredictable. Their diplomatic representatives maintain perfect decorum, but their emotional signatures are remarkably controlled, almost impenetrable at times. This suggests training and discipline beyond what the Krillarians believe possible for such a young species. Lyra felt a disturbance in the empathic field of the galaxy, a tension unlike anything she had experienced before. Something fundamental was shifting, like tectonic plates preparing for a cataclysm. I fear the Empire's arrogance blinds it to changing realities. The Krillarians have ruled for so long they believe rule to be their natural right. But rights, I have observed, last only until someone stronger questions them. The following day, Emperor Zarthus III summoned an extraordinary session of the Grand Synod. Representatives from every corner of the Empire filled the massive chamber, a marvel of engineering that could accommodate thousands of species in their various environmental needs. The Emperor's mechanical suit, standing nearly 4 meters tall and adorned with rare minerals and energy conduits, dominated the central dais. When he spoke, his voice resonated with artificial enhancement, designed to inspire awe and obedience. Representatives of the Krillarian domain, the Emperor began, I have summoned you to witness the proclamation of the Colonial Restructuring Decree. Holographic displays materialized above the assembly, showing elaborate diagrams of resource redistribution and governance modifications. But to Lyra's empathic sense, the true nature of the decree was clear. It was a mechanism to tighten control and increase exploitation of outer rim planets, particularly targeting Terran colonies. The benevolence of our empire requires certain adjustments to ensure continued prosperity. Zarthus continued, his tone dismissive of any potential opposition. The Terran sectors have shown inadequate production efficiency. They will benefit from direct Krillarian oversight. Lyra noticed a disturbance at the chamber's entrance. The Terran delegate, Governor Thorn, arrived late, a shocking breach of protocol. Unlike the ornately dressed representatives around him, Thorn wore a simple, dark uniform. His face, bearing numerous scars for what Lyra presumed to be military service, remained expressionless as he took his designated place. What struck Lyra most profoundly was not his appearance, but his emotional signature. Where she expected to find fear or anger, she instead encountered an iron wall of will and a deep, resonant sorrow unlike anything she had sensed before. Emperor Zarthus paused momentarily, his mechanical suit shifting slightly toward the late arrival. "The Terran representative honors us with his presence at last," the Emperor remarked, his artificial voice dripping with sarcasm. Perhaps the concepts of punctuality remain beyond primitive understanding. Scattered laughter echoed through the chamber. Thorn remained impassive, his eyes fixed on the Emperor's gleaming suit. "As I was declaring," Zarthus resumed, "the colonial restructuring decree will commence implementation immediately. The Grand Synod's endorsement is, of course, requested as a formality." This was typical of imperial declarations, presenting decisions as already made while maintaining the illusion of democratic process. Representatives typically offered their obsequious approval without question. "Does the Grand Synod acknowledge and endorse the Emperor's wisdom?" asked High Chancellor Vorix, the Emperor's chief administrator. Before the customary chorus of agreement could begin, Governor Thorn stepped forward. The chamber fell silent. This deviation from protocol was unprecedented. Thorn said nothing. Instead, he activated a small device in his hand. Suddenly, the massive screens throughout the Grand Synod Hall flickered. The Imperial presentation disappeared, replaced by raw footage from a Terran Outer Rim colony, Cygnus X-1, that had recently been pacified by a Krillarian fleet under the Emperor's secret directive. The imagery showed horrific devastation. Civilian population centers reduced to ash, mass graves, children being separated from parents, systematic extermination of resistance. A deathly silence enveloped the Grand Synod Hall. Through her empathic sense, Lyra felt waves of horror and revulsion emanating from the representatives, even from those most loyal to the Emperor. "These are the actions your empire took 3 standard months ago on Cygnus X-1. Thorn finally spoke, his deep voice carrying throughout the chamber without artificial enhancement. "A peaceful colony that refused to surrender additional resources after your quotas had already been met." The Emperor's mechanical suit emitted a high-pitched tone, indicating agitation from the energy being within. "This is sedition. This doctored propaganda is authenticated and verified." Thorn interrupted, something no one did to Emperor Zarthus III. "The verification codes are embedded in the feed. Any representative may confirm them." Several delegates were already examining the data on their personal devices, their expressions changing as they confirmed its authenticity. "Your reign is built on lies and blood," Thorn continued, his voice remaining measured despite the gravity of his accusation. "Today, truth stands revealed." He stepped closer to the central floor, and Lyra sensed no fear from him, only resolute purpose. "The Terran Alliance knew of your planned assault on our outer colonies. We prepared accordingly. Your decree is invalid, as is your moral authority to rule." The Grand Synod erupted in shocked murmurs. Emperor Zarthus III, for the first time in centuries, displayed genuine rage. His mechanical suit glowed fiercely, power systems charging visible weapons integrated into its structure. "Guards, arrest this traitor," the Emperor commanded. The Imperial Guard, elite Krillarian warriors with ceremonial but lethal energy weapons, advanced toward Thorn. The governor activated another device. An invisible energy field expanded throughout the Grand Synod Hall, neutralizing weapons systems and internal communications. The guards found themselves unable to progress further, their weapons powerless. "What is this treachery?" Zarthus demanded, his artificial voice distorting with fury. Thorn's response was not in words, but action. He moved toward the Emperor's dais with unexpected speed, his movements suggesting enhanced strength, perhaps from a personal exoskeleton or some other Terran technology concealed beneath his simple uniform. The Emperor's suit discharged an energy blast that should have incinerated Thorn. Instead, the governor raised what appeared to be a small rod that somehow absorbed or deflected the energy. The defensive systems of the Emperor's suit flickered momentarily. Before the Emperor could deploy secondary systems, Thorn reached the dais and struck the suit's central control matrix with his device. The impact caused a catastrophic power fluctuation. The magnificent mechanical armor that had housed Emperor Zarthus III for centuries temporarily lost energy, leaving the ancient being within vulnerable and weakened. In that moment, Thorn did something unthinkable. He grasped the base of the massive, immobilized Imperial suit and began to drag it down from the dais, across the Grand Synod floor, toward the main exit. The heavy metal armor created a horrific screeching sound against the marble floor, a discordant note that would echo in galactic history. Not a single person in the chamber moved to intervene. Thousands of representatives from across the galaxy watched in absolute silence as a Terran dragged their Emperor, their living god, across the floor like discarded machinery. Lyra, overwhelmed by the tsunami of emotions flooding the chamber, could barely maintain her composure. Through her empathic sense, she perceived astonishment, fear, and from some, carefully concealed satisfaction. The collective realization rippled through the assembly that they were witnessing the unmaking of an immutable order. Most shocking of all, this scene was being transmitted throughout the Empire. Somehow, Terran operatives had seized control of the communication network. Every world under Krillarian rule was witnessing the Emperor's humiliation. The galaxy truly watched in silence. Thorn pulled the Emperor's disabled suit through the grand entrance of the Synod Hall and disappeared, accompanied by a Terran Special Operations team that had apparently been waiting outside. The energy field disappeared, weapons systems reactivated, and chaos erupted in the chamber. Factions immediately began to emerge. Hardline Krillarians called for immediate retaliation against all Terran worlds. Others, sensing opportunity in the power vacuum, began discussing succession scenarios. Still others expressed fear at the technological prowess demonstrated by the Terrans. How had they neutralized the Emperor's supposedly invincible defenses? Lyra joined a small group of neutral ambassadors trying to maintain calm and establish communication with Thorn. Their urgency stemmed not from loyalty to the Emperor, but from fear of the galactic war that could erupt at any moment. The power equilibrium that has maintained stability for millennia has been shattered, said Ambassador Krell of the Vaunturi Collective. If we do not establish dialogue immediately, we risk unprecedented bloodshed. I can attempt to sense Thorn's location through empathic resonance, Lyra offered. Though his emotional signature is unusually controlled, the intensity of today's events may have created traceable patterns. Before they could implement this plan, all communication systems throughout Xylos activated simultaneously. The Terran Alliance had issued a galaxy-wide broadcast. People of the galaxy, this is the Terran Alliance. Emperor Zarthus III is in our custody. We do not seek destructive war, but a new order. For too long, the Emperor has maintained power through deception and brutality. The message continued, revealing additional evidence of atrocities committed under Zarthus's regime and previously hidden technologies that Terrans had discovered, technologies related to an ancient civilization that predated even the Krillarians. We demand the formation of a new galactic council with equal representation for all species, the dissolution of the exclusively Krillarian military command, and public trials for the Emperor and his inner circle. You have 48 standard hours to respond. The ultimatum sent shockwaves through the power structures of the Empire. Military commanders demanded authorization to launch immediate strikes against Terran worlds. Conservative factions insisted on rescuing the Emperor at any cost. Progressive elements within the Krillarian elite, long silenced, began cautiously voicing support for reforms. Lyra and the neutral ambassadors seized this chaotic moment to organize secret negotiations between reformist Krillarian officials who had grown weary of Zarthus's rule and representatives of the Terran Alliance. The negotiations took place in a secured diplomatic vessel in orbit around Xylos. Lyra used her empathic abilities to help the parties understand each other better and detect deception. Your demonstration of force was shocking but effective, admitted Counselor Mevis, a senior Krillarian official who had privately opposed many of the Emperor's policies. But surely you understand that public trial of Emperor Zarthus would trigger civil war within Krillarian territories. Our society has revered him for millennia. And while your society revered him, millions suffered, replied the Terran representative, not Governor Thorn but a skilled diplomat named Alara Voss. Justice demands accountability. Justice without stability will mean justice for no one, countered Mevis. We are prepared to accept significant reforms, but certain concessions must be made to preserve order. Lyra sensed genuine desire for change from Mevis, though also self-interest in preserving Krillarian influence. From Voss, she detected unexpected flexibility beneath her firm rhetoric. The negotiations stretched through days of tense discussions. Occasional reports of skirmishes in outer systems heightened the urgency. Without central authority, some Krillarian commanders had initiated punitive actions against Terran outposts, while others refused to act without clear direction. Finally, a fragile agreement emerged. A new galactic council would be established with equal voting rights for all member species. Emperor Zarthus III would be permanently exiled rather than publicly tried, a compromise to prevent Krillarian civil war. The Terran Alliance agreed to share aspects of their technology for common benefit while retaining core secrets. The signing ceremony for the new Galactic Charter took place in the former Grand Senate Hall, now repurposed as the Council Chamber. Representatives from all worlds attended, their emotions forming a complex tapestry that Lyra could barely interpret. Hope mingled with suspicion, relief with uncertainty. Not all species celebrated the new arrangement. Conservative Krillarians plotted to restore their power. Other species feared the Terrans would simply become the new oppressors. The galaxy remained deeply divided. Lyra observed the ceremony from her position among the neutral delegates. She noticed Governor Thorn standing silently in a corner, his expression complex, showing no signs of triumph. The man who had dragged an emperor across the Senate floor seemed burdened rather than victorious. When the formal proceedings concluded, Lyra approached him. "You do not celebrate," she observed. "Yet you achieved your objective." Thorn regarded her with eyes that had witnessed too much suffering. "What I saw on Cygnus X, one cannot be undone," he said quietly. "My wife and daughter were there during the pacification. This was never about victory." "Revenge, then?" Lyra asked, feeling the deep sorrow beneath his controlled exterior. "Justice," he corrected, "and prevention. What happened today was necessary to break the old chains. But I harbor no illusions that we've created paradise." He gazed across the chamber at the diverse species, attempting to forge a new political reality. Creating is harder than destroying. We removed a tyrant. Now comes the real challenge. In the days that followed, Lyra continued her observations, recording for posterity. The galaxy witnessed in silence as Emperor Zarthus III was dragged across the floor, a moment that shattered millennia of perceived immutability. That silence has ended. Countless voices now rise, demanding their place among the stars. The Terrans, who dared drag a god from his throne, now face their greatest challenge, not conquest, but construction. Humans possess remarkable capacity for both cruelty and compassion, destruction and creation. Which aspect will define them as they step onto the galactic stage remains to be seen. Some say they merely seize power through superior technology and audacity. Others believe they genuinely seek a more equitable order. I have sensed both truth and deception from all parties in this transition. What remains certain is that the galaxy has been irreversibly transformed. Power, once concentrated in a single immortal being, now disperses among many. Whether this dispersal leads to true justice or merely new forms of oppression will unfold in the coming years. The future remains unwritten, but it will no longer be authored by a single hand. Lyra stood at her observation window on Xylos, sensing the complex emotional ripples of a galaxy forever changed. Below her, the council chamber, Once the Grand Synod Hall, where an emperor had been humiliated, bustled with representatives debating the implementation of the new charter. Beyond the artificial atmosphere, ships from hundreds of worlds moved in careful patterns, maintaining wary distances from one another. Military vessels from former adversaries conducted joint patrols, their crews learning to cooperate despite centuries of indoctrinated hatred. On distant worlds, populations that had known only imperial rule for generations attempted to understand their new reality. Some celebrated in the streets. Others huddled in fear of the unknown. Many simply continued their daily struggle for existence, skeptical that distant political transformations would improve their lives. The emperor's exile had been carried out in absolute secrecy. Only a handful of individuals knew which isolated system now contained the once mighty Zarthus III, stripped of his mechanical suit and confined to an energy containment field that would last for centuries. Governor Thorn had returned to Terran space, declining a position on the new council despite being urged to accept. Rumors suggested he had retreated to a remote colony to mourn his family properly, though some claimed he now led a secret Terran initiative to prepare for future threats. The Krellarian elite had splintered into multiple factions, some embracing reform, others plotting restoration, many simply attempting to preserve their privileges in the new order. And through it all, Lyra observed, recorded, and occasionally helped mediate disputes with her empathic abilities. The neutral stance of the Xantids had proven invaluable during the transition, their capacity to sense deception making them trusted intermediaries. 6 months after what historians were already calling the dragging, Lyra received an unexpected visitor in her diplomatic quarters. Alara Voss, the Terran diplomat, arrived without announcement or escort. "Ambassador Lyra," she said without preamble, "we need your unique perspective." "I serve as neutral observer," Lyra reminded her. "Taking sides would compromise my purpose." "I'm not asking you to take sides," Voss replied. "I'm asking you to look deeper. You can sense emotional currents beyond our perception. Several council members have begun acting strangely, making decisions contradictory to their previous positions, avoiding direct contact with certain species." Lyra's antennae quivered with concern. "You suspect external influence? Mind control? Or replacement?" Voss said grimly. "Some of the technology we discovered in the Emperor's archives suggests capabilities far beyond anything publicly acknowledged. We believe Zarthus may have contingencies we haven't identified." This revelation disturbed Lyra deeply. If true, the fragile peace they had established remained in grave danger. "What you ask risks my neutrality," she noted. "What I ask may preserve the very possibility of choosing sides," Voss countered. "If something is systematically undermining the council from within, your people's neutrality becomes meaningless." Lyra considered this. Her species had maintained their observer status through millennia of galactic politics precisely because they refused to become entangled in power struggles. Yet if the foundation of all political discourse was being corrupted, what value remained in watching silently? "I will observe the council members more closely," she finally agreed. "Not for the benefit of Terran interests, but for truth itself." Voss nodded, seemingly satisfied. "That's all I ask." The dragging broke one system of control. We must ensure it isn't simply replaced by another, more subtle one. After Voss departed, Lyra returned to her observation window. The artificial skyline of Xylos glittered as it had for thousands of years, but everything beneath that unchanging facade had been transformed. She reflected on the moment that had altered galactic history. A single human dragging an emperor across a marble floor while thousands watched in stunned silence. Physical power had always been the least of Zarthus's attributes. His true strength lay in the perception of his invincibility. Once that perception shattered, millennia of carefully constructed authority collapsed instantly. "We live in the age of revelation now," she recorded in her final entry of the day. "Old truths fall, new questions arise." The galaxy watched in silence as the Emperor was dragged across the floor. That silence demonstrated the fragility of power based on fear and deception. "Now we must all choose," continue watching in silence as new powers emerge, or add our voices to shape what comes next. Even for my people, observers by nature and tradition, neutrality may no longer be sufficient. To witness without acting may become complicity. The Emperor was dragged across the floor, and in that moment, responsibility for the galaxy's future was dragged from a single throne and distributed to us all. What we build upon the cleared foundation remains to be seen. Outside her window, the first stars became visible as Xylos rotated away from its artificial sun. Among them were the distant lights of newly liberated worlds, Terran expansion zones, conservative Krillarian strongholds, and countless other civilizations now struggling to find their place in the transformed galactic order. The dragging had ended. The building had just begun.